Is the US panicking after Esmail Qaani's Baghdad visit, effectively blackmailing Iraq with dollars and security ties to push back against Iran-backed militias? Trump is building pressure on Arab ally just as Iran woos militia and political leaders in Baghdad. Will Iraq tilt toward Tehran if the squeeze continues? Trump weaponizes US banknotes, halting dollar shipments to Iraq and freezing parts of security cooperation, turning cash and training into tools of coercion. Could this become another embarrassment for Trump if the Middle East ally drifts into the Iranian camp? The United States has suspended dollar shipments to Iraq and frozen some security cooperation with its military, in a move aimed at increasing pressure on Baghdad. According to the Wall Street Journal, the step is intended to pressurize Iraq to curb Iran-backed militias operating in the country, by limiting access to physical US cash and defense programs. US Treasury Department officials blocked a cargo plane delivery of nearly $500 million in US banknotes, halting a scheduled shipment of cash to Baghdad. These funds were proceeds from Iraqi oil sales held in accounts at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which routinely disperses physical dollars to Iraq's central bank. This was the second such delay since the US-Israeli war against Iran began on February 28, indicating a pattern of using dollar shipments as leverage. The move followed weeks of attacks by Iran-backed militias on US facilities in Iraq in support of Tehran, including strikes on bases and diplomatic sites. In a statement on April 21, the Central Bank of Iraq said it was not short of US currency, pushing back against reports of a dollar shortage. The bank said it had fulfilled all requests from banks and exchange companies for US dollars, insisting that domestic demand for cash dollars was being met. This financial squeeze comes days after Iran's Quds Force commander Esmail Qaani visited the US allied nation to meet political and militia leaders. According to Iraqi reports, Esmail Qaani, the head of Iran's IRGC Quds Force, began his latest visit on April 8, just as tensions around the ceasefire were intensifying. Qaani first sat down with militia leaders, the men who command fighters on the ground, and then held separate talks with leaders of the Shi'ite Coordination Framework. The SCF, or Shi'ite Coordination Framework, is a powerful coalition of pro-Iran Shi'ite parties that currently forms the largest bloc in Iraq's parliament. Reports say Qaani's main mission was to hammer out an agreement on who the coalition should nominate as Iraq's next prime minister. Initially, the coordination framework leaned toward bringing back Nouri al-Maliki as prime minister, a figure long seen as close to Iran. In response, Donald Trump reportedly threatened that the US would cut off vital aid to Iraq if al-Maliki returned to the premiership. Iraqi media say the talks also focused heavily on the future of the militias that have become a permanent part of the country's security landscape. One idea on the table is to integrate these militias into official state security institutions, while keeping their political and armed wings formally separate. Another stated goal of Qaani's visit was to address regional de-escalation and its impact on Iraq, according to an account carried by AFP. An Iraqi source said Qaani was keen to ensure that security in Iraq does not deteriorate during these sensitive times for the wider region. News of Qaani's visit was confirmed just days before the ceasefire between the United States and Iran is due to end on April 22. Despite marathon talks lasting up to 21 hours at a stretch, Washington and Tehran had still failed to seal a full peace deal by April 20. At the same time, more than 10,000 troops were reported to be heading toward the Middle East, a deployment widely seen as a signal of possible renewed military action. Iran, for its part, has been steadily rebuilding its military capacity, reportedly bringing its forces back to nearly 70% of their pre-war strength. Iran released a video on April 19 showing underground missile and drone launchers, signaling that its strategic weapons infrastructure remains active despite weeks of war. The IRGC-linked video portrayed ongoing overhaul and reconstruction work on Iran's missile and drone stockpiles, suggesting Tehran is trying to showcase recovery and resilience during the ceasefire. IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Said Majid Mousavi said the replenishment of arms had been accelerated, according to reporting cited by Iranian outlets. Mousavi said the pace of replenishing weapons increased during the ceasefire period, indicating that Iran used the pause to restore parts of its arsenal. His remarks were reported by WANA and Press TV just ahead of the expected expiry of the ceasefire window. Said Majid Mousavi said, and I quote, "Iran's speed in updating and reloading missile and drone launchers have surpassed even its pre-war pace. We are aware that the enemy is incapable of creating such conditions for themselves during the ceasefire. Since the ceasefire began on April 11th, the United States has had to bring in ammunition from the other side of the world in a trickle. They have lost this phase of the war as well. They have lost the Strait, they have lost Lebanon, and they have lost the entire region." Unquote. Mousavi's claims came after US media reports argued that Iran still retained the ability to sustain its missile capability despite the conflict. The Wall Street Journal, citing US intelligence assessments, reported that Iran still has thousands of ballistic missiles in reserve. Those missiles could reportedly be pulled out of hiding or retrieved from underground sites, reinforcing concerns that Iran's strike capacity was not eliminated. US President Donald Trump announced on April 21 that the current ceasefire with Iran would be extended, altering the timeline for the temporary pause in hostilities. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump said that attacks will be held off until Iran puts forward a formal proposal, tying the extension to the prospect of a new diplomatic offer. The truce, which had been set to expire on April 22, was extended at the request of Pakistani mediators, as Trump stated, reflecting their continued role as a back-channel broker. Hours earlier, Trump had publicly expressed that he was not in favor of prolonging the ceasefire, according to Al Jazeera coverage of his on-the-record remarks, underscoring the last-minute nature of the reversal. On X, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif also expressed gratitude to Trump for extending the ceasefire, welcoming the decision as a chance to preserve the diplomatic window. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I have therefore directed our military to continue the blockade and, in all other respects, remain ready and able, and will therefore extend the ceasefire until such time as their proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded, one way or the other." Meanwhile, Iran continues to insist that removing the US blockade is a necessary precondition for any new round of negotiations. Iran's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has called the blockade an act of war, and has even likened it to a form of maritime piracy, underlining the gravity with which Tehran views the measure. Araghchi has explicitly linked the resumption of negotiations to an end to hostilities against Iran's commercial shipping, demanding that Washington first lift the restrictions before talks. Meanwhile, President Trump has suggested that Iran wants the Strait of Hormuz kept open primarily to avoid major economic losses, portraying Tehran's interest in the waterway as driven by financial concerns. Trump has argued that lifting the blockade without a prior deal would weaken the United States' leverage in negotiations, insisting that Washington must maintain pressure.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.